This lesson is also about equations. We're still in the equations chapter, but we're going to talk about literal equations. So that's just a fancy way of saying we're going to deal with equations that have more than one variable. You have been used to variables or to equations having one variable. Today we're going to talk about equations that have two variables, sometimes three variables, and so on. We're going to start with a word problem, rewriting a literal equation. So in this equation, 10x plus 5y equals 80. X is the number of pizzas and y is the number of sandwiches. How many sandwiches can you buy if you buy 3 pizzas? Notice in blue, that equation, we've got an x and we have a y. So that's very different than any equations you've seen before. We're going to learn how to solve for a variable even though there's another variable in the equation. So first thing we got to figure out, what information do we know? Well, besides the equation, they've told us that we are buying 3 pizzas. And then we need to figure out what information are we trying to find. They ask us, we're trying to figure out how many sandwiches we can buy after we've already purchased 3 pizzas. So think about that. They told us the amount of pizzas, and we're trying to find the amount of sandwiches. Well, if X represents pizza and Y represents sandwiches, then we are trying to solve for which variable? For Y. We're trying to solve for Y. We already know X. They told us we're buying 3 pizzas. So first, we're going to get Y all by itself before we plug 3 in for X. In order to do that, think about solving equations. We want to get rid of any term or any constant that is not with the variable we're trying to solve. So we're trying to solve for Y. So let's get rid of that 10x. To get rid of it, you do the opposite. So we subtract 10x from both sides. Since 80 and negative 10x are not like terms, you do not merge those together. So when I rewrite after I've eliminated the 10x's on the left side, you're going to get 5y equals 80 minus 10x. Do not put those together. They are not like terms. One's a constant and one's an x. From there, I notice that 5 is with the y. What is it doing to the y? It's multiplying. So to get rid of multiplication, we undo it by doing the opposite, which would be division. Now with these equations, anytime you divide or multiply, every single piece has to get multiplied or divided by the same thing. So if I want to divide by 5, then that piece, 80 and negative 10x get divided by 5. Every single piece. From there we're going to simplify. 5y divided by 5 is y. 80 divided by 5 is 16. Negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. We have officially solved for y. So again, just a reminder, y represents sandwiches and x represents pizza. So what we're going to do is we're going to take that equation and we're going to insert 3 for pizzas because we know what that is. They told us we're buying 3 pizzas. Once I simplify that, 16 minus 2 times 3 is 6. So 16 minus 6 is 10. Y equals 10. What have we just discovered? We can buy 10 sandwiches if we buy 3 pizzas. Okay, so sometimes it's not in a word problem and they throw a lot of variables at you. So in this equation, what do you get when you solve negative t equals r plus px for x? So they're going to tell you which variable you want to isolate. What variable do we want to get alone? They tell us x. So anything that's not an x, we want to get to the other side. So let's start. I have an r and I have a p that are not with the x, or that are with the x that we need to get to the other side. You always want to do the simplest thing first, so subtraction or addition is always the best first step. I can't subtract p or add p because it's being multiplied, but I can get rid of the r. So I'm going to subtract r from both sides. R and t are not like variables, so when you simplify, you're just going to simply have negative r minus t. Some of you might have put negative t minus r, and it's the same thing. Notice x is still not by itself. P is being multiplied to it. So to get rid of p, you do the opposite. You divide. And if you remember from the last problem, when you divide or multiply, every piece needs to get divided or multiplied. So they're both getting divided by p. So p divided by p is just 1. And then negative r minus t divided by p. You can't simplify anymore. Those are 3 unlike variables, unlike terms. So your answer, although it looks messy and gross, is negative r minus t all over p. That is the value for x. Sometimes it's not as complicated, so if you look at this one, what equation do you get when you solve c equals 2 pi r for r? So if you recognize this equation, you'll know that this is the equation for circumference of a circle. When they ask you to solve for r, that means we're going to get r all by itself. We will not have a numerical value for this. So a lot of times with literal equations, we're so used to having x equals 5, y equals 15, z equals -4. But with literal equations, you're going to have letters in your answer. Just like the last one, we're going to have letters in the answer for this one too. But sometimes it's not as complicated like I have previously mentioned. If we're going to get r all by itself, I notice that the 2 and the pi symbol are both multiplying r. So since they are multiplying r, to get rid of them, we need to divide. Since two pieces are being multiplied, the 2 and the pi, we can actually divide by both of those pieces. So I'm going to divide the right side by 2 pi. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So I'm going to divide c by 2 pi. The 2 pi's will cancel out on the right, and then you're just left with c over 2 pi equals r. Again, looks like a messy answer, but once your variable is all by itself, you're done. Alright, so if you want a challenge, try to figure out what the equation would be when you solve ax minus bx equals c for x. So pause the video, work on that. Once you are done, play the video again and I'll show you the answer. Okay, if you solved this correctly and got x all by itself, it was a very challenging problem. You should get x equals c over a minus b. If you did it, great job. If you didn't do it, this is a really challenging question, so no worries.